Fensom dummy half. It's with the halfback Williams. Williams goes himself, comes out the other side, gets it to Croker, bounces away from a would-be from De Gois, puts a kick out wide, looking for Shander Earl, and Earl is in again. Oh, stop it, it's starting to hurt. Rugby league. Rugby league.
Hello and welcome to the SC Playbook podcast. I am your host, Tim Williams. Smiling from ear to ear at the moment after the release of the round 25 teams, the final round of the NRL Supercoach season, final round of the NRL regular season, looking pretty good, but absolute drama in the teams. We expected it all year, but big restings across a lot of clubs. There are a few silver linings with a few names, popular players named to play this week, particularly the Melbourne Storm, which were a little bit rocks and diamonds from a Supercoach perspective. Here with me to go through all of it, as usual, is the Supercoach Spy, who has gone into about $1.01 to sneak into the top 100 by the end of the season. Spy, how are you, mate?
That's encouraging, mate. Going really well. It was actually a bit of a devastating weekend. I've had mostly ups this year, but I was in a couple of big head-to-head leagues, and from the moment Gagai got sin binned for looking in the direction of Tupanura on the weekend, I knew I was in a bit of trouble, and a few things didn't go my way. Actually, Cherry Evans, I was playing against him. I opted for Cleary over Cherry, which ended up costing me both leagues, mind you. And Cherry took an intercept on the buzzer and put Saab away to score. It's just one of those weekends where all you could do was laugh despite a little tantrum I had. Back on board now and chasing that top 100, boys. How good was the footy? It's all happening.
She can be a cruel game at times, mate. That, as you said, that Gagai sin bin, one of the softest simnings you will ever see in rugby league. They're losing the plot at the moment at times, but getting weary, the old refs. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Spy, you're just outside the 100, yeah?
Yeah, I dropped 18 spots to 147, but it's not many points. It's about 70 or 80. And looking at what's unfolded this week, I can't wait to hear what Adam's got to say, because personally I'm looking at, I've actually got about 19 or 20 players. So I've got some options there. With one trade up the sleeve. So hopefully Adam's got good news for me on that front, and I suspect he might. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But I would love to finish top 100.
That is some ridiculous numbers you got there, Spy. People would be salivating hearing 20 numbers in a Supercoach squad this time of the season. Our next guest is Quantium CEO and Supercoach weapon, Adam DeRusi. Ads, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. I feel like a bit of a fraud when you say Supercoach weapon the way my side's going, but I'm well, mate. I'm well. I'm probably looking forward to being put out of my misery, though, with the Bulldogs and my Supercoach side, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Mate, you were lingering around the top 1,000 there only a couple of rounds ago. I gather you've hit a bit of a wall.
Yeah, mate, I'm fielding a 17 each week, but it's with junk like CSC for Talakai, and I'm sure he's a good bloke. But he will never be my Supercoach side again. I just can't watch the bloke play. I just never seen a lazier Supercoach player than that big fella. So and Clint Gutherson, he got stuck in my side, and I finally traded him out to Pappenhausen. I think they scored about the same. So
far out.
Just haven't had anything go right, mate. But that's the way it goes.
That's right, mate. Well, this is the week you need from big CSC for Talakai. He'll play about 25 minutes off the bench, demoted to the bench when we all need him to score well. That's right. He'll bag a double for us and go 70-odd, I reckon. The mighty Kuma Stallions, 1,324 points last week, so not too bad, but possibly a little bit below par. Dropped down to 640th overall. 18 players at the moment this week. That's including Sammy Walker, who's been benched, Talakai and TPJ. So not in a bad position at all this week. But again, I dare say that team lists are going to probably chop and change throughout the week as a few things unfold. The SC Playbook overall, in-house league, little update there. We were second last week out of 17,000 leagues. We've dropped back to third overall. Shout out to Matty Ryan, who went huge for us, top score to keep us in the mixed and in the overall. I don't think there's a prize as such there, but for overall glory, hopefully we can chase those last two spots in the final week. And I think across the board, there's a fair bit of depth in our squad. So maybe a little bit of sniff there. On this week's show, we'll go through the Supercoach relevant team news, Adam's stats, which is the big one this week. Must listening on that one. Adam will reveal to us how many numbers the top-ranked Supercoach sides have this week. It's going to be pretty grim, I dare say. We'll have a look at a few Hail Mary skipper options for those looking to win grand finals, jump into the top 100, 1,000, 10,000, whatever it might be. Also, we'll have a pretty decent crack at the vice-captain loophole this week, I dare say. So an important topic there. We'll look at DCE versus Cleary, both with nice matchups there. Our top sport punting plays, a few trades, and take a few questions on social. Just quickly, guys, we will be back next week for a season recap podcast. We'll go through the Supercoach Awards, what we learned from the season, reveal our final rankings, all that sort of stuff. Hopefully you're able to tune into that one. But for anyone who doesn't, a big thank you for all your support throughout this Supercoach season. It's been tremendous as usual. I say this time and time again, but the Supercoach community is a pretty special one. It absolutely rocks. It's such a positive interaction across socials and the website and all sorts of things. So a big thank you for that. And for anyone who doesn't tune in, we're going to be whipping out a survey for SC Playbook in the next week or two to try and get a bit of feedback for the site and the podcast to try and make it better for you. So if you can take 5 minutes to fill that out, it'll result in a better product next season and even for the Big Bash season. Cheers, guys. Let's get stuck into the Supercoach team news of the round. Big stuff going on at the Roosters, the first of many clubs. The first one being Angus Crichton returning from a 3-match suspension. Matt Ikuvalu returning on the wing. A handful of owners, people still own him. Lachlan Lamb moves into the halves. Sammy Walker to the bench. Spy, that's a bit of a cruel blow for you and myself.
Yeah, well, I've got Cleary in now, so I can sit. I feel a bit bad saying this, but I can afford to sit Sammy Walker now he's on the bench. I suspect Robbo's just looking to freshen him up ahead of finals. He probably would have liked to do it last week, except they simply didn't have the cattle to get on the field. They had Lockie Lamb in the centres. So, look, he might not play many minutes. We'll just have to see. Obviously, it's top 4 is still on the cards, though, if they can get the win. So that's going in the favour of Sammy Walker, but obviously he'll have an eye on finals and he's had a big season for a small body. So if he could play limited minutes and freshen up before next week, Robbo would love to do that, I'm sure. So you might need the Raiders to turn up and make a game of this one to get 7 in the action around half-time.
He played, I think it was 38 minutes in his last game off the bench a few rounds back against the Dragons. I think it's going to be a pretty tight-fought contest between the Raiders and the Roosters, particularly with a weakened Roosters outfit. Are you thinking similar again, mate? A 38 sort of minute stint in that second half?
Well, amongst the panic of that Sunday afternoon a few weeks ago, he only came on due to an injury. So who knows what would have happened? It probably depends on the scoreline, to be honest. I suspect, without trying to panic anyone, that Robbo would love to play him like 0 minutes or 10 minutes if they could get away. But as you said, Raiders will be up for it. Maybe he could play anywhere between 20 and 55 minutes, somewhere in that bracket. But we really won't know. Honestly, it could be 0 if they're going well.
Mate, aside for those teams fighting for, a genuine chance at top 4, which is pretty much Manly's to lose, and the teams genuinely fighting for a top 8 spot, and there's a couple in there, the minutes, rotations, all sorts of things this week, it is going to be an absolute lottery, so tough one to predict. At the Sharks, Teague Wilton comes into the starting side. A few owners of Teague there will be happy. It demotes CSC for Talakai to the bench. I won't get Ads' thoughts because he'll walk out of the podcast and will be down a man for the rest of it. At the Storm, such an influential team naming there for Supercoach purposes. I won't go through all of it, but of the key Supercoach relevant players, Cam Munster out, Christian Welch, Josh Adokar, Remus Smith all out. Everyone else is good to go. Nico Hines, massively owned. He's been named at 5'8" alongside Jerome Hughes. Adam, do you sense more restings? Again, this is going to be speculative, but do you sense potentially more restings at the Storm come, I think, Friday night they play? Or do you think Bellamy sort of just got one eye on that minor premiership and securing 100 grand for the club?
Mate, I would think they want to win the game. Like, Bellamy's a pretty competitive guy. Like, I feel like they've been resting guys pretty progressively over the last 6 weeks. So I think Bellamy's been doing a pretty good job taking care of his side. And I think some of those blokes need the run, actually. Like a guy like Pappenhausen, I think he needs to find a bit of form, actually. So I think they'll play, but who knows?
Like it, mate, and I think a lot of Supercoaches will be praying he does. At the Eels, Isaiah Papali'i rested, Clint Gutherson, Junior Paulo, Mitch Moses, all out, mass restings there, which is bad news on most fronts. Good news on the front of if you own any Penrith players, they could go bonkers this week. The line there has gone from 10 points yesterday morning to about 26 points to show the impact that's had. At the Knights, Jaden Brayley, Mitch Barnett, both out. The rest of the side have been named as per program as far as a full-strength side goes. Spy, the Knights are a team who I suspect may have more restings come game day. Again, based on nothing, but I mean, they've got nothing to win or lose out of this game. They may keep their spine intact as they try to get a bit of a game time together. What's your feel?
Yeah, their attack hasn't been very good, to be honest, last month, so that bodes in favour of them all playing. On the other hand, they've worked pretty hard from a defensive sense to get themselves in the position they are, so it wouldn't shock me to see a couple of spells. It's one of them things, do you risk Ponga just for 80 minutes of extra cohesion? I probably wouldn't. I know he was carrying a sternum injury early in the season. Maybe he doesn't play. But obviously, like any game this weekend, you just got to check that 1 hour late mail or 24 hours before as well. There's a few people on Twitter that look after that because it's just going to be crucial. And even on Sammy Walker before, like he could start on the weekend. We don't know. Yeah. Could be a mind game. Robbo already said previously that he wants teams guessing about what they're going to do. So it's going to be all about that late mail this weekend, boys.
Yeah, anything could happen there, mate. The Bunnies, another massive shake-up. We tipped this one a couple of weeks ago, but Adam Reynolds rested, Damien Cook, Dane Gagai, Alex Johnston, Latrell Mitchell obviously out suspended, Cam Murray, Cody Walker all out. In saying that, a couple of those guys have been named on the extended bench, but I feel that's just to make up numbers. The only silver lining to that is Tane Milne comes into the side, which is good news for owners of him, and there are a few out there. At the Warriors, Josh Curran comes into the side there. Had a little bit of maybe a shoulder injury last weekend. He's had a few little battles, but been named to go for the Warriors, which is huge, huge news there. Guys, Quantium have jumped on board as a sponsor for the SC Playbook podcast this season. Quantium are Australia's premier data science and artificial intelligence company. If you're interested in a career fueled by game-changing analytics, break away from the pack by joining the Quantium team today. Hit us up for more details on that through our email or socials if you're interested. Now, let's get stuck into the most important topic of the podcast, one of the most important topics of the year. While it might not have any impact on what you do this week as a side, in terms of interest, it'll be huge. It is Adam Darussi's stats, and he's got the numbers surrounding how many available players each Supercoach squad will be carrying this week. What have you got for us, mate?
Yeah, well, it is carnage. To be honest, there's just so many numbers in front of me. I've just got to choose which ones to use. So why don't we go with, say, the top 1,000 teams, because I suspect a lot of people listening are probably interested in that. So if you look at the top 1,000 teams, 76% of them are short.
Wow.
Yeah. So and 63% of them are short more than one. So it's carnage. So to give you an idea, there's 2% of those teams have only got 11 players, 4% have got 12 players, 9% have got 13 players. So, yeah, so it's pretty bad. So for the Spy, just a special one for you, mate, I did it while we were talking. So if you're coming 147th, of the 146 teams in front of you, 70% of them are short.
It's outstanding news. And how many are less than – how many have multiple absences? Do you have it there, buddy?
Yeah, so 51%. Yeah, 51% have at least two out.
Wow, so more than half?
Yeah, I actually reckon it's even worse than that as well, because there will be some players some teams that won't be able to have an AE play. Like you'll think they've got 15, but they'll only be able to have 14 because they won't have the 5'8" and they won't have a hooker.
Yeah, and in that, mate, is there guys on the extent on benches like no. So you wouldn't generally play? You haven't looked too far into that at this stage?
No, I've called guys like Cody Walker, I've said they're out. So anyone on the extended bench, I've said they're out.
Yep.
But the guys on the bench, so I've counted Sammy Walker as a player, I've counted Talakai. Like guys are actually named 14, 17, I've counted.
Yeah, for sure.
And some of those, so even some teams that have got 17, like I've got 16, but two of mine are Jackson Torpenay and CSC Talakai. Like between them, they'll be lucky to be worth one player. Yeah. So you got to look and think you're going to be in pretty good shape. The other thing I actually did, which is the first time I've done this, I'm going to have to do the numbers while I'm talking here, but I actually worked out for the top 100 teams, now, how many trades they made last week, just to see basically how many I think they've got left, because you'd think if you had a trade left last week and you were chasing in the top 100, you've probably used it. So of those top 100 teams, in total they made – that can't be right. I was going to say 14 trades. That can be right. So that just shows you most of the top 100 don't have a trade left.
Yeah, which makes sense because they've had a crack early, gone hard, and probably trying to hold on.
Yeah, and I've worked it out for the top 10 teams. I've actually gone back and looked at their sides over the year. I'm not going to go into the details just because some of the guys might be listening and it's unfair, but let's just say it's pretty thin on trades for everyone.
Yeah, nice.
Nobody's Supercoach teams are safe from Adam's prowling eyes.
Yeah.
Especially people who run the same team under multiple names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We won't get started on that, will we?
No
No,
comment.
that's awesome stuff, mate. Adam's full article will be out later in the week, and you can have a look at the full details there and what might impact you a little bit more as you hunt for the top 100,000, whatever it might be.
Hey, Timmy, I'll give you another one. It's in the top
mate.
10, say, right? So for the top 10 teams, 3 of them have got 14 players and 3 of them have got 15 players.
Wow.
So for the people who are just outside the top 10 who are chasing them, that's what they're chasing. So 6 of the teams are missing either 2 or 3 players.
It's something, mate, that we've spoken about on the podcast for a long, long time now in terms of this season, but the changes to the overall rankings this week are just going to be immense, aren't they, based on the numbers you've just thrown out?
Yeah, big time. I mean, obviously, and depending on how your players go, because we all know it's like when you're playing for a bye weekend, you can have good numbers, and if they don't score any good, it's no good. But if you can have those extra numbers and they can score well, then it could be you could move a huge amount.
Yeah, it's an exciting weekend of Supercoach action. And you also have guys there that you haven't had to rely on throughout the whole year, and they might be low ownership, who come in and you get to ride them for the 20 or 30 minutes that they're on field. It's exciting stuff. Sean Bloor, I can't wait to play Sean Bloor this week. Spy, anything to add there, mate?
Big glory. I'm excited as well. I was just going to say it's a perfect example of why there's a lot of people probably panicking and going, "Oh, I'm not even going to bother this weekend." But realistically, if you got 14 or 15, that's okay. It's not that bad. It's just a weird season and a weird end to the competition. So run with your 15 and see how you can go.
I tell you who I do feel sorry for. The team coming second, not wanting to single them out so much, but they've got 14 players. So they've got so close to get the second. I mean, I know Timmy's going to win out in first, but they've got the second with 14 because there's good money for second in there, $5,000 or whatever. But he's just a sitting duck because he's got 14 and the 2 blokes behind him have both got 18 available. So he's gone.
Yeah.
Over
I think that's Barry, who's a good friend of the podcast, will say. He's a playbook subscriber. Timmy Moody up top's a recent playbook subscriber as well. So hopefully we've been able to have some sort of impact there. Ads, any other thing to add there before I cut you off prematurely again?
No, mate. I think as we go through, I can pull out more stuff if you're interested. But it's there's plenty of teams short, and it's going to make for a very interesting week, I think.
Good stuff, mate. Fellas, topic 2 of the episode. Let's get into initially it was going to be called the Hail Mary Skippers topic because it was sort of thinking if you had to go for a big VC loophole or go aside from Tommy Trbojevic, who would you look at to win a grand final if you're down by a mile or you're chasing a top spot or whatever. But now I think we've got the idea that pretty well every Supercoach out there, minus the Spy possibly, is going to have pretty close to a free crack at the VC loophole this week. So 2 cracks at captain. Tommy Turbo is the obvious one again, averaging about 137 or something absurd this season. For starters, Spy, I think Tommy Turbo and DCE have got to be pretty huge chance at a rest around the 50 to 60 minute mark. In fact, I think if they get out to a decent lead against the Cowboys, with a far better for and against than teams around them, say the Roosters and the Eels, I think that every chance at resting early. Who are you looking at for skippers this week? And I mean, I suppose you've got to have one on Tommy Turbo, but you've also got to be pretty tempted to throw your second skipper option on a team playing after the Seagulls, hey?
Yeah, it's an interesting tactic. Obviously, if you get a free crack at it, then why not VC Tommy and see what's happening after that? Just when you mentioned with Turbo and DCE, if the Roosters lose to Canberra, we know that the Penrith are basically going to make the Eels this weekend. They're playing their reserve grade side. Manly would have outright fourth already covered by the end of the night. They might not even play at all. I think it'd be madness to play them, but they might. If they are chasing that top 4, I feel like Turbo, of course, has a chance at an early shower. It just makes sense. And DC would nearly have to be second in line. And they can pull some of the hardworking forwards like Jake off as well. Honestly, it could be. I think they tend to play at least 60 minutes. guys, they're coming up for the second half. That 20 minutes flies by, and then the coach goes, all right, let's get them off. We've got this one covered. But anything could happen. But I'd still bank on them playing pretty solid minutes. In terms of your left field skippers and what you're chasing there, for me, if you can get or you own Nathan Cleary on Friday night against that Parramatta outfit that's been named, I think he has to be your VC. He could go ballistic. He dropped the ball about 4 or 5 times last weekend, much to my dismay, but he was hitting the line hard. He was the Cleary of old. He of course, as well, making an early shower. But if he plays 70 or 80, he could be on absolutely anything. He could crack 200, and then you could probably lock that in, and that gives you every chance at that massive left field skipper, especially if one of Turbo or one of those boys goes off early. And I've got a few other options in mind. I'll let you guys go first, but Cleary's got to be massive if you own him.
Yeah, and I probably should have started with that, but I mean, if you've got Cleary in there, and I'm not sure what the updated numbers are, Adam will have them there, but it might be 20% of coaches overall, or the top ranked coaches, should I say? But Turbo's probably got to be your VC. Turbo Cleary, and then Turbo's probably your captain after that if you need him. I suppose outside of them two, Adam, who are you looking at as your skippers this week?
I'm just looking at Turbo, mate. I just look at Turbo every week. I think I don't have Cleary, so I don't have that luxury. So 34% of the top 10,000 have got Cleary now, but so the top 1,000, it's 30%. So he's gone up a fair bit. So I reckon if you got Cleary, like the Spice said, that's pretty standard play, right? Like you'd VC Cleary, but then the question would be like, how much does he need to score to be comfortable to keep him as captain? I think he needs to still score a lot. So the other option I reckon is if you could VC Turbo, and then, you know, if you just say you got 17 or 16 players, if you could VC Turbo and then only have to use someone else if he bombs out, that'd be ideal. Except the matchups after that game aren't real flash.
There's not much.
No, unless you had a Tigers player that you thought could score well against the Dogs. But yeah, and Fafita, I just don't think you can reliably captain Fafita at the moment,
particularly off the bench.
No, so I think you probably do have to go VC before Turbo. So I'll just stick him with Turbo. And mate, last week, to give you an idea, even though there's teams trying to make up ground and all that sort of stuff, at the end of the day, last week, most people still captained Tommy. It was like 90% of the top 10,000 captained him.
Yeah, outrageous.
For all the talk, most people still stick solid, which I think is a smart play.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good point you make, because I think it'd be for non-Nathan Cleary owners, which is obviously about 70% of us prior to trades this week, it's a tough one. And ideally, you'd be going, as we said, Tommy Turbo as your vice captain. If you've got a high upside player that's semi-reliable in the following 3 games after the Seagulls play the Cowboys, you know, you hope that Tommy Turbo goes low. You know, DCE gets the early try assist. Tommy goes off after 50 minutes for 70-odd points. But there's so few options there. So, I mean, the options in my team, it's probably going to have to be Matty Burton as a VC. And, I mean, you'd probably want 150 from him to be even considering looping. Spy, who are the other options that you had in mind?
If you do own Ryan Pappenhausen, he plays Friday night. Obviously, he's a huge option. Teddy's a huge option Thursday night as well. But I think if you're in a head-to-head battle and you're sitting there come Saturday afternoon, Manly's yet to kick off, and you're thinking, I just need to do something dramatic here or I'm going to lose. Let's throw the kitchen sink at it. Ruben Garrick, your man, on that left edge. The Dogs did quite a good job defensively last week, especially in their side defence, but Cowboys traditionally are a little bit weak on those edges. Garrick at any point of any day could score 4 or 5 tries and kick 10 goals. So he's your man, and you hope Turbo gets that early spell, but he'd be my Hail Mary 100% if you're many of us own Garrick.
Just on Pappenhausen and Teddy, obviously the problem is you can't VC them because you got Turbo. I mean, you can make that mistake, but then you can't captain Turbo. But so you have to be going straight out captain on one of those guys, and they play the first 2 games of the week. I don't know if you'd be that. I mean, unless you are absolutely desperate and you know you're like 4 players short and head-to-head or something. But
you have to be real desperate when you're spot on. You're foregoing Turbo to do that. So I'd much prefer just to maybe wait and see, do a VC on another position, and as I said, just go Garrick if you're in desperate need come Saturday afternoon.
Mate, Turbo had a quiet game against the Bulldogs and he scored 160.
I know.
We kept him quiet for a good 40 or 50 minutes.
Sub dropped it over the line. Garrick got held up. He had another one disallowed, and he was quiet. He could have scored 260 in a quiet game.
Easy.
Just a little side note on that topic. The Spy actually did a really good article on Jason Saab and Morgan Harper as super pods last week. So just to run through a couple of Saab's numbers that he pointed out in the article. Without Tommy Trbojevic this season, he scored 1 try in 8 games. With him, he scored 21 tries in 15 games. So with that matchup against the Cowboys this weekend, I think, as you mentioned, really, really good trading target this week, Jason Saab, at a pretty affordable price if you do have a trade to play with. So something, just one worth having a look at there, and one that I'm certainly considering. Although for Brian Toto, non-Brian Toto owners, he's obviously got to be pretty tempting in the CT spot as well there. Boys, topic 3, and probably won't be a long topic this one, but I did initially have down DCE versus Cleary because in terms of a trade-in option this week, Cleary obviously a little bit more expensive there. DCE with a dream matchup against the Cows, chance at an early rest. Cleary with a matchup against the Eels, who knocked off the Storm last weekend. But adds, now that the Eels have rested their whole side, if you can get to Cleary, it's got to be Cleary, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Like, you'd love to have Cleary in your side as an option. He could go enormous. Absolutely enormous. So, yeah, I would. Yeah, I think it's a pretty easy one, Cleary, if you got him. Again, unless you're in a head-to-head and you need to do something kind of wacky.
Boys, not to bring up a sour note, I'm nearly over Sunday what happened, but after a lot of decision-making last weekend, I basically flipped a coin. It was either Cherry Evans and Brian Toto or just straight get Cleary and save a trade. I ended up going with Cleary, which I don't regret because it makes sense to play. I ended up losing my biggest head-to-head league by 28 points, and DCE outscored Cleary by 31. It's it under me.
Spy, hopefully Cleary gets 250 for you this week and he gets you into the top 10 and jags you a bit of cash there. So,
Repays the faith, yeah. Well, I'm still happy to Cleary.
Considering you knocked the Cooma Stallions and my side out in the SC Playbook League in the last 2 weeks respectively, not a lot of sympathy there, mate.
Yeah, I'm with you. The Spy will be lucky to have an article and a spot on this podcast last season after the damage he's caused to all of us.
No, that's unlucky, man. That's unlucky.
And Cleary, so in the other big thing about the Cleary and DC, not so much the debate, we've a lot of people won't be able to afford Nathan Cleary. I know myself, I am 20 grand short of getting Nathan Cleary into my team this week. Because Cody Walker's been rested, that's going to give a lot of people with a trade up their sleeve an opportunity to get in either DCE or Cleary. One thing I will touch on, because it's a personal situation for me, it's, as the Spy mentioned, there's a chance that DCE and Turbo get rested, or DCE we're talking about here, should the Roosters get done by the Raiders this weekend on Thursday night. So we'll know early. So don't use that trade too early, because if DCE gets arrested and he's your final trade and you don't have 17 players, you would just be absolutely livid. So just be careful with that one. But DCE is still a terrific trading option this week, provided Manly are playing for a top 4 spot. Otherwise, I'd be a little bit concerned. Boys, let's hook into a few top sport punting plays. Last weekend was a big weekend for the bookies because the Eels upset the Storm. The Tigers and Dogs showed a little bit of fight in their games against some heavyweight opposition. So, stuffed all our players, stuffed multis across the nation. Hopefully a bit better luck this week. Going into the final round of the season, the leaderboard, I'm up $65. Desi's down $11. The Spy is down $9.50, I think it is. So, if you want to follow our tips, all markets and odds are taken exclusively from Top Sport. If you're joining up, use the code SC Playbook, 18 plus only, gamble responsibly. Spy, just you and me this week throwing a few plays out. What have you got for us? You've got some ground to make up, unless you want to finish last out of the three of us.
Well, mate, I'm certainly not one to sit and finish second, so I'm not going to do nothing and just ensure I beat Desi. I'm going to come and have a crack at you. So I've sort of had a look into it. I don't have the odds yet on a Brian Todd double, but I'm thinking this is my final crack at beating you. The Warriors, Sunday afternoon, they're about $3.90. I don't mind their lineup against the Titans, so I'm going to take the Warriors outright to win into a Brian Todd double, which, what do you think that pays, boys? Maybe $2.50 or something against Parrot, if that. Might be too much. into Penrith to cover the line, which is 27.5 at the moment. By my calcs, I've got that about 15 to 18 to 1, so that will get me in front of Tim when you bugger it up.
Well, I'll just do the exact same play, in which case the spy can't catch me.
Well, I'll change it. So
no. Mine's a little bit of a dull play, only because I was flat out with the team list after the odds got updated. Didn't have time to have a good look into it, but I'm going to go that Panthers 27.5 line versus the Eels. The Dragons, it's a 2.5 line against the Rabbitohs, or it was the last time I checked. That'll pay about $4, get me up to above $100, and just secure my spot on top of the table.
and then beauty.
Yep, you fire, mate.
I was just going to say, then that'll put me over the mark. I'll come straight over the top of your Sunday afternoon for the Warriors and into first position in my rightful position. Jeez, I'm excited. Game on.
We'll go over that on next week's podcast. Just another little one. Pray for the spy and pray for myself, but we both got on very early yesterday morning on a few massive – the bookies didn't update the odds based on the potential restings. So games like the Panthers and Eels, the Bunnies and the Dragons was the big one, and to a lesser degree the Sharks and the Storm, the odds weren't reflecting what the sides are now. So got some big multis riding on those ones. So we'll be celebrating like we've come second in Supercoach if they get up.
Yeah, we need the Sharkies to come home because Melbourne aren't as decimated as the other sides. But I'll tell you what, there's some juicy numbers in there. I've got about 4 or 5 different multis on to see what happens.
In for context, the Dragons were paying $6.50 yesterday morning. They're into pretty well even money. The line in the Panthers Eels, the line was about 11.5. It's now out to 27.5. So they just missed a beat. It didn't help us that Bellamy. Apparently the Storm were resting 3/4 of their side. They've only rested half of it and are still favourites against the Sharks. So we need a few more restings there. But anyway, that's enough of boring you. Boys, quick one on our round 25 trades and skippers. Ads, I believe you're out trades-wise, and skippers we've spoken about. Spy, What are you thinking?
Trades is the big one. Interesting call to make, trades-wise. I've kept one up the sleeve. It was actually in case Cody Walker rested because I wouldn't have a 5'8", but I've had a look through the 5'8s. I don't really fancy any of them that much. So I'm tempted just to take an AE, which is probably going to be Dunster, so he might get me 20.
Give you the free VC loop.
Yeah, free VC loop on Cleary, and then get in Brian To'o on the Friday night, which I can't. No, I can definitely do it. I can do it for Gagai or AJ. And just take whatever To'o gets because I think he could go enormous this week. Obviously a bit to consider, but I really like that play this weekend. And then in terms of VC and skipper, Cleary into Turbo for sure.
Nice, mate. I've got one trade up the sleeve. At this stage, looking at probably Cody to DCE. But the other one that's pretty enticing now after the team's named is obviously Brian To'o. So potentially To'o to come in for someone like Alex Johnson or whoever there. Boys,
no interest in Matt Burton,
mate. He's my backup. If I don't go with To'o, it would be Burton straight for Cody Walker. Correct.
Yeah, I'd be blowing off Hayes Dunster. Forget that. I reckon Matt Burton against the Tigers with that lineup. They're not going to pull him off early because they might take off Cleary, but then it's all better for Burton. Plus, I love Burton
as well, potentially. So something to look at there, mate.
Oh, it'd be absolutely music to my ears if Cleary was just got a little bit of cold feet, Ivan, with his son and the chance of re-injury. If they rested him, moved Matty Burton to the halves for that game, be absolute magic. But that's not going to happen, so don't worry about it. Boys, couple of questions to wrap it up. Spy, first one from you. For Adrianosaurus Rex, Big Ado. Will the Spy play this week with 15 to give him a chance in the Turbos Hammy Cup Grand Final?
I'm actually just chatting to him now on Twitter, old Adro. So I had a look. I think he might only have 13 or 14 players. So thanks for that, mate. If there wasn't some money on the line, I wasn't chasing top 100, I'd match you and see what we could come up with and have a good game. But sorry, buddy, not this weekend.
Good luck to you in the final of that one, Spy, representing SC Playbook up top. Question from Sean Rutherford. Last question for the big dance. I need to replace Manu. My thoughts are Hines if starting, Rapana, Gagai, or Ramian. His CT dub that are different are Aitken and Best, mine are DWZ and another. So, what are your thoughts there, Ads? If out of Hines, Rapana, Gagai, and Ramian. Gagai's obviously out, so it'd be Hines, Rapper, and Ramian.
Oh, Hines for sure for me. Like I think against that Cronulla side, he looks like he's going to play 80. He's at 5'8". And I think he's just looking good. Like the other night, he scored 39 in not much time. I'd Hines for sure.
Question from our good mate Cyril Jenkinson. Hey, Gurus. Has this year given hard lessons on the importance of keeping trades until the end? Will you guys next year be planning to have your last 2 trades for the final round? Spy, what have you got?
It certainly is a hard lesson for a lot of people, Cyril lad. I mean, we've tried to spruik it all year that you need to save those trades. I don't know if you need to take 2 into the final week, but it's more about what Tim often talks about. It's just keeping that depth as much as possible. The way footy is these days, you probably can't afford to nuff out so many people. But obviously, it is handy to have one trade just coming into the final round just to give you a little bit of leverage there. But mate, it's a hard lesson for a lot of people, as Adam's numbers suggest.
Ads, putting you on the spot a little bit here, but we'll be doing the recap podcast next week. Just your quick thoughts, mate. Anything major sort of lessons that you've learned from this Supercoach season? Obviously, how much the game's changed and impacted the game overall. What sort of changed for you?
I think my problem was I didn't adapt quick enough to the kind of changing nature of the attacking stats. So what I've been, as I was telling you about before, I've been doing a bit of analysis of just looking at the top teams, how they've evolved over the year. So I'll publish that in the next couple of weeks or something. But it's quite interesting. And when I look at my own players, I think like a guy like Alex Johnston, I think the teams that have done well jumped onto blokes like that quick and they didn't miss out. And so I didn't. And then after I missed out on 2 weeks, I was then too stubborn and I didn't bring him in. And he just cost me 100 points every week. And there was my season. A bit like you were tossing up with Garrick and you almost didn't bring in Garrick, but then you did. And you're lucky you did because he got 200. So I think one thing is the big plays this year have been having the right halves at the right time of the year and having the right CTWs, whereas in the past it always used to be about second rowers, and it just hasn't been the case. Like, how long since we've ever had a team win, like Tim's going to win, with the second rowers of Tupanoa and Kickout? Like,
yeah, seriously.
They're almost super coach irrelevant for some players, and yet he's going to win because he's just got amazing halves and centres. And props almost been irrelevant. Hooker's almost been irrelevant. So we all talked about fullback being so key, but as it turned out, it was centre and the halves, and I don't think I made that adjustment quick enough. So unless they change the scoring system, which is another whole debate again, then that's the big change for me.
Yeah, it's a good shout. And on the same topic of that, I suppose, I mean, you antipoded Alex Johnston, which based on every other year was a fine player. We knew he could go low. He was mass owned. Everyone jumped onto him, which it could work out. I antipoded Ruben Garrick for a few weeks there. It cost me big time. Eventually I got onto him and got a little bit out of him, but everyone had him, so it didn't matter. You can't really afford to anti-pod play, or you can't really afford to anti-pod those outside backs with the huge ceilings, can you? It's just, you get left behind.
No, absolutely. And so when you do, you cost yourself both the price, but also the points. But then their price goes up so much that it ends up hurting you in some other part of your team. So, yeah, I'll publish these stats probably next week or something, just showing how the top 1,000 teams have evolved week to week. But it just shows how quickly some players became key. And I think if you then go and look at your own side and say, okay, did I get in early on the right guys, or did I get in late or miss out? That's probably what's decided where you finish in your season. As opposed to, everyone says, who are the critical players to start with? I don't think your starting side matters that much. I think most people almost probably can't even remember their starting side. And certainly the guys that have won, they haven't won because they nailed their starting side. They've nailed because they made the right trades during the year.
Yeah, it's been a nuts year, and as I said, the game has changed so significantly this year. So, interesting to see different approaches for next season. We'll chat about what we learned in more detail next week in the final podcast of the year. Question Spy from Paul Kelly. Thanks for the awesome pod, fellas. I assume that's Australian music legend Paul Kelly, who loves the SC Playbook podcast. It's been the highlight of my Wednesday all season. Saved one trade, likely getting rid of Dewey, and can have any 5'8" or hooker I want. Currently have Cody, Brayley, and Watson. What are your thoughts there, Spy?
I think it's probably out of my boy Harry Grant to bounce back, or as Adam suggested earlier, maybe Matty Burton. I don't have the list in front of me of who the options are there, but I mean, those two spring to mind. Any of you boys got any other ideas off the top of your head?
What do you reckon, Ads?
He didn't say the cheese, did he? I don't know if he's got the cheese.
Nah, no cheese.
I don't know. I just love the way the guy plays footy. Although he's only got a 5-round average of 60, so whereas Harry Grant's 70, I'd probably. I mean, I'm just looking at the highest averaging 5/8s and hookers, and
Would you consider Jerome Luai?
they're all injured or out. So the highest, the guy with the highest 5-round average that's still left is Matt Burton, then Harry Grant, and then Brandon Smith. Everyone else is injured in the top 13 or 14.
Would you consider controversial? Would you consider Jerome Luai over Matt Burton?
I would, boys. You know why? It's because he started to run last weekend. I was really frustrated watching him just from a footy sense because he kept just tipping on. There was big space back off his left foot, which he loves. And he was running so often early in the season. I think Ivan might have had a little word to him at half time because he came out in the second half and started taking the line on again. He scored a good try on that right edge. He went off his left another time. So it might be absolute just magic for Penrith fans and Luai owners that he might have just found that running spark again heading into the finals.
Yeah, he did look good, but yeah,
I'd still go for
he's a brave guy. Like we're looking at his scores, he's had, I think in the last 10 or 12 weeks, he's had 2 scores over 40.
Yeah, it's grim reading.
He's been a disaster.
Yeah.